So now what I'm going to do is customize the admin just a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to customize this thing called list filter. What this will allow me to do is filter all of my models or my instances of my model inside of whatever this admin is. So I can actually filter down by like active, for example. And the filter is going to be very similar to how this works, although not identical. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and jump back into the admin for this one. And we refresh in here, we now see that I've got this filter of active, right? And it actually makes sense to have something more like active than, say, video ID or some sort of uniqueness, right? You want a major thing. If you actually need to search for something, you would search in here. Active is a good example. If you put video ID in here, when you only have a few video IDs, it's not going to be that big of a deal, right? But once you start having a lot of video IDs, then it's going to start to get fairly cumbersome as far as the admin is concerned. So we have it here as active, and we can search down and filter and all that. But what if I actually wanted to show active as a field? That's actually probably a good idea while we're using these kinds of filters. So I'll bring this in up here, get rid of the video ID on the list filter, save it, and refresh in here. And now I can actually see whether or not it's active or what's going on with this item, right? So we could actually change this to being something different, and we could call this published and save that in here. And if I try to refresh, what happens? It's saying that it refers to published, which is not a callable or an attribute of video all admin. So what does that mean exactly? Well, let's go ahead and define published in here and return, well, what do we return? Let's just go ahead and return true. So I'm going to refresh in here again. It says it takes 2 positional arguments, it says it takes 1 positional arguments, but 2 were given, which means that we only have 1 argument allowed in here. So let's go ahead and do the catch-all of args and keyword args. Now we can go ahead and print out what args and keyword args are. Save that, refresh in here. And, we need to rerun the server there. And make sure self is still in there. That was a silly problem. Okay, and so let's restart that. And what we see here is it's actually giving us the object itself. So inside of the admin itself, we can actually add in our own callables in here in the sense of how obj is. And then inside of obj, I can do obj.active, right? So I can actually create something really that simple, which is also very nice, right? So I can see that it's published. That filter could actually work similarly, but it's actually not as simple to override what's mentioned in the filter. This is a common thing that you might end up doing inside of your project anyway. However, if you are going to have a method of some kind on the admin, something as general as published, you actually might want to not have it in the admin, but rather have it on the model itself. So we would define published in here and return, self.active in this case. I'm actually going to change this from published to is published, and I'm also going to turn it into a property just to make things a little bit better. But the general idea is now you know how to customize a single function or a method that's on this model admin and how we could actually call it inside of this list display. And there we go. So now I've got is published in here. And again, we can still filter by what that value would be, which I think is still very useful. And this is published method is going to change a little bit, which is also why we're putting it in now. But there's another thing is like actually showing the ID itself. So let's put the ID in for this object. So that's, of course, the database ID that shows up just fine, right? As expected, probably. And if we actually look at the admin itself, the model admin in here, we also might want to have some read-only fields. So read-only underscore fields. And perhaps in this case, I want to have ID and is published as fields that would be read-only inside of this as well, right? And now, when it said that it didn't have a callable, so this error, scrolling up a little bit, it's either it doesn't have a callable, as in it didn't have a model method or a method on the admin or on the model itself, or it's not an attribute being either a field or a property, just like this, That's why it was giving us that error, which would also be true on the read-only fields or pretty much any of these other ones as well, although the behavior might work unexpectedly. So if I went in here and said something like timestamp, well, I actually don't have that as a field just yet. So if I try to bring it in, it's going to give me that same exact error. And then again, coming in and just saying, define timestamp and returning none, this would actually give me, an invalid timestamp or basically saying none for that. So that's just the general idea, something that you'll want to get pretty familiar with if you're going to be using the admin a lot. Now, I will say if you spend too much time customizing the admin, you should probably put it somewhere else, not in the admin, but rather in an actual view, not actually just making the admin too cumbersome. But I think I gave you enough tools now that you can customize a lot of very common features in the admin, as well as adding a proxy model and customizing all of those same features. You can do the same customization in the proxy model as well because it's just referencing the original model. So I think this is actually really, really cool. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, let's keep going.